Have you ever wondered how an innocent love story could spiral into a dark obsession, leading to a heartbreaking tragedy? In this true crime documentary, we unravel the harrowing tale of how a mother's infatuation with her daughter's boyfriend ended in an unimaginable tragedy. Stay with us as we navigate through the chilling details, uncovering the twisted motives, the shocking events, and the devastating consequences that ensued. This is a story that delves deep into the human psyche, exposing the dangerous path of unchecked desires. So, make sure to watch until the very end to uncover all the haunting secrets hidden beneath the surface. The story begins in a quiet, suburban neighborhood where the Parker family lived. Sarah Parker was a loving, ambitious teenager who had recently started dating Alex, a kind and respectful young man. Sarah's mother, Julia, was a single parent who had always been overprotective of her daughter. From an early age, Julia showered Sarah with affection and support, often blurring the lines between love and control. Sarah and Julia shared a close bond, one that often left Sarah feeling as though she owed everything to her mother. This dynamic set the stage for an unusual tension when Alex entered Sarah's life. He was the first serious boyfriend Sarah had ever introduced to Julia, and his gentle nature quickly won over both mother and daughter. At first, Julia expressed genuine interest in Alex, inviting him over for dinners and family outings. Yet, as weeks turned into months, Julia's behavior took a peculiar turn. She began to intrude on their private moments, always finding excuses to be around them, whether they were watching a movie in the living room or going out for a simple walk. Alex noticed Julia's increasing involvement, but hesitated to mention it to Sarah, not wanting to strain their relationship. Initially, Sarah brushed off his concerns, attributing her mother's actions to her natural protectiveness. But as Julia's presence became more pervasive, Sarah began to feel the weight of her mother's obsession. Julia's fixation on Alex wasn't just about control, it was a dark and consuming infatuation. She started to exhibit signs of jealousy whenever Sarah and Alex spent time alone, making Sarah feel guilty for enjoying her relationship. This unhealthy dynamic began to strain the once harmonious bond between mother and daughter. As Julia's infatuation grew, so did her intrusiveness, creating an environment of constant tension and unease. The Parker household, once a haven of warmth and security, became a battleground of conflicting emotions. This unsettling background sets the stage for the tragic events that were to follow, making it clear that the seeds of disaster had already been sown in the intricate fabric of their lives. The first encounter between Alex and the Parker family was quite the picture of an idyllic introduction. Sarah had meticulously planned a cozy dinner at their home, hoping to make Alex feel welcomed and cherished. As the doorbell rang, Sarah's heart raced with excitement and a tinge of nervousness. Julia, wearing her warmest smile, opened the door to greet Alex. He stepped in, holding a bouquet of fresh flowers, a thoughtful gesture that immediately won Julia's approval. Dinner was set, roast chicken with all the trimmings, a meal meant to impress. As they gathered around the table, the initial conversation flowed smoothly. Alex, with his polite demeanor and genuine interest in Sarah's family, quickly put everyone at ease. He shared stories from his childhood, his ambition to become a teacher, and his love for hiking interests that resonated well with both Sarah and Julia. Yet beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect evening, subtle signs of tension began to emerge. Julia's eyes followed Alex intently, lingering a bit too long on his face when he spoke. There was an unusual intensity in her gaze that hinted at something more than mere curiosity. She laughed heartily at his jokes, perhaps a bit too heartily, and complimented his every word, creating an atmosphere of slight discomfort that Alex couldn't quite pinpoint. As dessert was served, Julia's compliments grew more personal. She praised Alex's intelligence, his manners, and even his appearance in a way that felt oddly intimate. Sarah noticed the change, but dismissed it as her mother simply trying to bond with her boyfriend. After dinner, they moved to the living room for coffee. Julia sat close to Alex, engaging him in deeper conversation about his future plans and personal beliefs. Her probing questions seemed relentless, her interest almost fervent. Alex felt a creeping unease. Her attention was flattering, but also stifling. He glanced at Sarah, who seemed oblivious to the undercurrent of possessiveness in her mother's demeanor. As the evening drew to a close, Alex finally excused himself, politely declining Julia's offer to stay a little longer. Sarah walked him to the door, and as they shared a brief, sweet moment of goodbye, Julia watched from the shadows of the hallway, her expression unreadable but intense. This first meeting set the tone for the complex dynamics that would follow. Julia's seemingly benign interest masked deeper, darker emotions that neither Sarah nor Alex could foresee. What appeared to be a simple dinner was in fact the beginning of a tangled web of obsession and control, with Julia at its center, slowly weaving her way into the fabric of Sarah and Alex's budding relationship. The mother's growing obsession became increasingly evident with each passing day. Julia's behavior shifted from supportive to possessive, manifesting in ways that made Alex and Sarah deeply uncomfortable. Julia began to intrude on their private conversations, often lurking nearby and pretending to be preoccupied with mundane tasks. Her once welcoming demeanor turned into a relentless need to insert herself into every aspect of their relationship. She would often call or text Alex under the guise of needing advice or asking for help with minor household issues, creating unnecessary reasons to interact with him. These interactions became frequent and increasingly personal, veering beyond the normal boundaries of a concerned mother. Julia's strange behaviors escalated when she started showing up at places where Alex worked or spent his free time. She would casually run into him at the grocery store, the coffee shop near his workplace, or even at the park where he jogged. Each encounter seemed less coincidental and more calculated. Alex couldn't shake off the feeling that Julia was watching him, tracking his movements. His initial hesitation to mention these incidents to Sarah grew into a need to protect her from the unsettling truth. He knew that if he confronted Julia, it could lead to unpredictable consequences. Sarah, meanwhile, struggled to reconcile her mother's actions with the loving, protective figure she had always known. Julia's invasion into their personal space became more pronounced. She frequently eavesdropped on their phone calls, subtly inserting herself into their plans by offering unsolicited advice or insisting on joining their outings. One evening, while Sarah and Alex were enjoying a quiet date night at home, Julia walked in unannounced and insisted on staying. She claimed she felt lonely and didn't want to be by herself. This constant presence created a palpable tension, making it nearly impossible for Sarah and Alex to enjoy any private moments together. Julia's obsession took a disturbing turn when she began to undermine Sarah's self-esteem subtly. She would make offhand comments suggesting that Alex deserved someone better, planting seeds of doubt in Sarah's mind. Julia's manipulation became more apparent when she started to compete for Alex's attention, often dressing up and behaving flirtatiously when he was around. Her actions were inappropriate, blurring the lines between a concerned mother and a woman captivated by infatuation. As Julia's fixation grew, so did her intrusiveness. Sarah found it increasingly difficult to balance her relationship with Alex and the suffocating grasp of her mother's obsession. The Parker household, once a sanctuary of love and comfort, transformed into a battleground of conflicting emotions. Julia's need for control and her unhealthy attraction to Alex created an environment of constant strain and unease. This growing obsession set the stage for the tragic events that were yet to unfold, marking the beginning of a dark and twisted path that none of them could escape. The first major escalation occurred one evening when Sarah and Alex planned a romantic dinner at Alex's apartment, hoping for a night away from Julia's prying eyes. Yet Julia managed to insert herself into the evening, showing up unannounced and bearing an elaborate excuse about car trouble and needing to use Alex's phone. Reluctantly, Alex let her in, and what should have been a private dinner turned into another awkward evening, overshadowed by Julia's presence. Her interruption was not a mere inconvenience, but a deliberate attempt to maintain her proximity to Alex, hinting at a manipulation that neither Alex nor Sarah could easily dismiss. As days passed, Julia's tactics to maintain control grew bolder and more invasive. She began planting doubts about Alex's loyalty and intentions, carefully constructing scenarios that painted him as unreliable. She would subtly suggest that Alex was seeing other girls or wasn't serious about the relationship, preying on Sarah's vulnerabilities. Julia's words, albeit wrapped in a veneer of concern, began to gnaw at Sarah's confidence, leading to tensions and mistrust between the young couple. One weekend, Julia orchestrated a situation that took her manipulative behavior to new heights. She devised a plan to create a misunderstanding between Sarah and Alex. Knowing Alex had a work meeting, she told Sarah that Alex had planned a surprise trip for them. When Alex inevitably failed to show up, Sarah felt betrayed, exactly as Julia intended. For days, Sarah's hurt and anger drove a wedge between her and Alex, a rift that Julia seized upon to further cement her influence over her daughter. When Alex attempted to confront Julia about her escalating interference, he found himself caught in a web of emotional manipulation. Julia turned the tables, accusing him of trying to come between her and Sarah, and painting herself as the victim of his supposed machinations. Her tears and dramatic pleas left Alex frustrated and more determined to protect Sarah, but also wary of Julia's unpredictable behavior. In response to Alex's attempts to distance himself and protect his relationship with Sarah, Julia grew more desperate and audacious. She began to monitor Sarah's phone, reading messages and listening to voicemails, often deleting those she deemed a threat to her control. When Sarah discovered this breach of privacy, it sparked a heated confrontation. Julia's defense was that she was only looking out for her daughter, masking her obsessive need for control with a facade of maternal concern. Tensions in the Parker household reached a boiling point when Julia planned an elaborate family event under the pretense of bonding. She invited Alex, knowing that any interaction during such a volatile time would likely lead to conflict. The evening ended in a dramatic showdown, with Julia accusing Sarah of neglect and disrespect, and Alex of manipulating her daughter. It was a spectacle that left everyone emotionally drained and further frayed the fragile relationships. The relentless strain began to wear on Sarah and Alex's relationship. Sarah, torn between her love for Alex and her deeply ingrained loyalty to her mother, found herself in an agonizing position. Julia's relentless attempts to manipulate and control her daughter, combined with her increasingly erratic behavior, pushed the family dynamic to its breaking point. The idyllic image of the Parker family shattered, revealing the dark undercurrents of obsession and control that had been lurking beneath the surface all along. This destructive pattern set the stage for the ultimate tragedy. The once warm and loving home became a battleground, consumed by Julia's unyielding obsession and the spiraling chaos it unleashed. The escalation of manipulation and the severe disruption of the family dynamic left scars that would never heal, foreshadowing a dark and inevitable conclusion. The breaking point came on a stormy night when the Parker household was engulfed in an atmosphere thick with tension and unresolved conflicts. The rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the turmoil inside. Sarah sat in her room, trying to make sense of the tangled emotions that had become her daily reality. She felt trapped between her mother's relentless obsession and her love for Alex, a suffocating struggle that left her emotionally drained. That evening, Julia had prepared an extravagant dinner, insisting that Sarah invite Alex over. Reluctantly, Sarah called him, her voice heavy with resignation. Alex, sensing the urgency, agreed to come, hoping to resolve the mounting tensions. As he arrived, the atmosphere was palpably different. Julia greeted him with an unsettlingly bright smile, her eyes betraying a simmering intensity. As they sat down to eat, Julia's probing questions and overly affectionate gestures became impossible to ignore. Alex tried to maintain his composure, but the strain was evident. Every bite, every word exchanged felt like a step further into a carefully laid trap. Julia's eyes darted between Sarah and Alex, her possessiveness barely concealed beneath a veneer of civility. The tension reached its peak when Julia abruptly accused Alex of leading Sarah astray, claiming he was the reason for all the family's recent troubles. Her voice rose, echoing through the house, a stark contrast to the storm outside. Sarah, caught off guard, tried to defend Alex, but her words were drowned out by Julia's escalating tirade. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Julia revealed she had been monitoring Sarah's phone, reading messages and listening to voicemails. This violation of privacy was the final straw for Sarah. She stood up, her face flushed with anger and betrayal, and confronted her mother. The argument that ensued was fierce, filled with years of pent-up frustration and pain. Amidst the shouting, Alex tried to mediate, but his efforts only fueled Julia's wrath. She accused him of turning her daughter against her, painting herself as the victim of a cruel conspiracy. Her words were laced with venom, her obsession laid bare for all to see. The intensity of her emotions revealed a woman teetering on the edge of sanity, consumed by a dark, uncontrollable infatuation. In a moment of clarity, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She declared she was leaving, taking Alex's hand and moving towards the door. Julia's face contorted with rage and desperation, her world crumbling before her eyes. She lunged towards them, her scream piercing the air, but it was too late. Sarah and Alex were already out the door, the storm swallowing them as they escaped into the night. Julia's breaking point had been reached, and the consequences were immediate. Left alone in her empty house, the weight of her actions came crashing down. The once warm and loving home was now a desolate battlefield, scarred by the turmoil her obsession had wrought. Her unchecked desires had driven her to the brink, and the tragic outcome was inevitable. In the days that followed, the fallout from that stormy night continued to unravel. Sarah and Alex, though free from Julia's immediate grasp, were haunted by the events that transpired. Julia, isolated and consumed by her obsession, sank deeper into her delusions, her world forever darkened by the tragedy she had set in motion. The breaking point had shattered the fragile equilibrium, leaving a trail of heartbreak and devastation in its wake. The tragedy that unfolded on that fateful night would leave an indelible mark on all their lives, forever altering the fabric of their existence. It began with an eerie calm that descended upon the Parker household, a deceptive lull before the storm. Julia, driven by a tormented mix of possessiveness and desperation, was not willing to let go, her mind a labyrinth of dark thoughts and consuming obsession. That evening, the weather mirrored the brewing disaster, with clouds rolling in and thunder rumbling ominously in the distance. Outside, the rain poured relentlessly as Sarah and Alex sought refuge at a nearby motel, hoping to find a moment of peace away from Julia's suffocating grasp. Inside the Parker home, Julia's anger festered, her thoughts fixating on the perceived betrayal by her daughter and Alex. The storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest within her. In her distorted state, she saw their escape as the ultimate act of defiance, an unforgivable severance of the control she had so meticulously constructed. As the night wore on, Julia's rage turned to a dangerous resolve. She could not let Sarah slip away, not with Alex by her side. In a frantic haze, she grabbed her car keys, her movements fueled by an irrational determination. The rain-slicked roads did nothing to deter her as she drove maniacally, her mind singularly focused on finding them. She knew the nearby motels well, having driven past them many times. It was only a matter of time before she would track them down. Sarah and Alex, unaware of the impending danger, sat in their small motel room, the tension beginning to ease as they talked about their future. They held each other close, drawing comfort from their shared resolve to break free from Julia's toxic influence. Yet, the tranquility was shattered when they heard the unmistakable sound of Julia's car screeching to a halt outside the motel. Panic seized them as they realized the extent of Julia's determination. Sarah, her heart pounding, urged Alex to lock the door, but Julia was already pounding on it, her voice a terrifying mix of anger and pleading. Sarah opened the door. She screamed, her fists hammering against the wood. "You can't leave me like this. You can't." Inside, Sarah and Alex exchanged a look of helplessness. They knew there was no reasoning with Julia in her current state. The door rattled under Julia's assault, and it was clear she wouldn't stop until she got what she wanted. Desperation gripped Sarah as she tried to think of a way out. The storm outside continued to rage, the wind howling and the rain lashing against the windows, amplifying the chaos within. Alex, trying to protect Sarah, positioned himself between her and the door. He spoke through the door, trying to calm Julia, but his words were swallowed by her hysteria. The situation escalated with terrifying speed. Julia's resolve turned into sheer madness. She screamed and banged on the door with an intensity that seemed supernatural. In a moment of sheer panic, Sarah grabbed Alex's hand, and they made a run for it to the back window. Julia, hearing their movements, became even more unhinged. She moved around the motel, trying to block their escape route. The couple managed to slip through the window, the rain drenching them instantly, the cold a sharp contrast to their adrenaline-fueled heat. They sprinted through the motel's parking lot, hoping to find help or at least put enough distance between them and Julia. But Julia was relentless. She chased after them, screaming incoherently, her voice barely audible over the storm. Alex and Sarah ran faster, their breaths ragged, their hearts pounding. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might escape, but then disaster struck. Julia, in her frantic pursuit, slipped on the wet pavement, her body crashing violently to the ground. The sound of the fall was muffled by the storm, but the impact was undeniable. Sarah and Alex turned back, horror-stricken. Julia lay motionless, the rain pooling around her. Time seemed to freeze as they hesitated, torn between their fear of her and their concern for her well-being. Finally, Sarah rushed to her mother's side, her hands trembling as she tried to assess the situation. Alex called for an ambulance, his voice shaking as he explained the emergency. The minutes that followed felt like an eternity, the storm's fury a harbinger of the tragedy that had just unfolded. When the paramedics arrived, they worked swiftly, but the gravity of Julia's injuries became apparent. She was rushed to the hospital, her fate hanging in the balance. Sarah and Alex followed, soaked to the bone, their minds reeling from the night's events. The waiting room was a blur of sterile lights and hushed voices, the weight of what had transpired settling heavily upon them. Hours later, a doctor emerged, his expression grim. Julia had suffered severe head trauma from the fall, and despite their best efforts, she hadn't survived. The news hit Sarah like a physical blow, a mixture of guilt, relief, and overwhelming sorrow crashing over her. Alex held her as she wept, their future now irrevocably altered by the night's tragic events. The aftermath of the tragedy was a period of intense grief and reflection. Sarah and Alex struggled to come to terms with the loss and the emotional scars left by Julia's obsession. The storm had passed, but its impact lingered, a solemn reminder of the consequences of unchecked desires and the depths of human fragility. The Parker household, once a battleground of conflicting emotions, was now a somber monument to a tragedy born of love, twisted into obsession. As Sarah and Alex moved forward, they carried with them the lessons of that harrowing night, their bond strengthened by the trials they had endured. Julia's story became a cautionary tale, a dark chapter in their lives that they would never forget. The storm had ended, but its memory continued to shape their path, a testament to the enduring impact of a mother's tragic obsession. The immediate aftermath of Julia's tragic death cast a haunting shadow over the Parker family and their small suburban community. The news spread quickly, rippling through the neighborhood with a mix of shock, sympathy, and morbid curiosity. Julia Parker, once seen as a devoted single mother, was now remembered in the context of a devastating obsession that had led to her untimely end. At the Parker household, the atmosphere was heavy with grief and unresolved emotions. Sarah struggled to process the complex feelings of loss, guilt, and relief that jostled within her. She found herself replaying the events of that stormy night in her mind, each memory a painful reminder of the mother's love that had turned dangerously possessive. Alex remained by her side, providing quiet support as they navigated the aftermath together. The community's response was a blend of compassion and bewilderment. Neighbors who had known Julia as an overprotective yet caring mother found themselves grappling with the darker truths that had surfaced. Whispers of the family's tragedy echoed through the streets as people tried to make sense of how such an idyllic suburban existence could unravel so drastically. Friends and family rallied around Sarah, offering condolences and practical assistance in the days following Julia's death. The outpouring of support was both a comfort and a strain, as Sarah was bombarded with well-meaning but incessant inquiries into the night of the tragedy. The local church organized a small memorial service for Julia, a solemn gathering that was marked by a pervasive sense of unease. Mourners spoke in hushed tones, uncertain of how to address the complicated legacy she had left behind. Sarah's grief was compounded by the need to settle her mother's affairs. The house that once felt like a sanctuary now seemed like a mausoleum, filled with reminders of Julia's intense presence. Sorting through her mother's belongings, Sarah uncovered journals and letters that shed light on the depth of Julia's obsession. These revelations were a double-edged sword, providing context but also deepening the sorrow and confusion she felt. In the wider community, the tragedy sparked conversations about mental health, the pressures of single parenthood, and the dangers of unchecked emotional dependencies. Local support groups and counseling services saw an uptick in participation, as people sought to understand and address their own struggles in light of the Parker family's ordeal. Alex, while grappling with his own trauma, became a source of strength for Sarah. Their relationship, tested by the harrowing events, grew stronger in the crucible of adversity. They leaned on each other as they faced the future, determined to build a life imbued with the hard-won lessons of their past. Months later, as the seasons changed and the initial shock of the tragedy dulled to a lingering ache, Sarah and Alex began to find a semblance of normalcy. They moved to a new apartment, leaving behind the physical space that held so many painful memories. The Parker home, once alive with the warmth of familial bonds, was sold to a new family, its history a silent testament to the fragility of human relationships. In the end, the aftermath of the tragedy was a period of profound transformation for Sarah and Alex. They emerged from the darkness with a deeper understanding of love, loss, and the importance of healthy boundaries. The community, too, was irrevocably changed, its collective consciousness touched by the cautionary tale of the Parker family. The legal proceedings that followed Julia Parker's tragic death were complex and emotionally charged. Initially, the authorities conducted a thorough investigation, piecing together the events that led to the fatal incident. Sarah and Alex were interviewed multiple times, their accounts scrutinized for any inconsistencies. The detectives faced the delicate task of untangling the nuances of a case steeped in obsession and manipulation, aiming to deliver justice for all involved. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that Julia's death was a result of her own actions, driven by a profound psychological disturbance. However, the legal system still required accountability for the trauma inflicted on Sarah and Alex. The district attorney decided to pursue charges related to harassment and stalking, focusing on the ways Julia's behavior had escalated to a dangerous level, endangering others. The trial was a grueling experience for Sarah and Alex, who were called upon to testify about the extent of Julia's obsession and the impact it had on their lives. They recounted the numerous instances of intrusion, manipulation, and emotional abuse, painting a vivid picture of Julia's downward spiral. The courtroom was filled with a somber tension as they shared their harrowing experiences, each detail shedding light on the tragic consequences of unchecked desires. Mental health experts were brought in to provide testimony about Julia's psychological state, offering insights into her behavior and the underlying issues that may have fueled her obsession. They explained how Julia's actions were not merely those of an overprotective mother, but rather symptomatic of deeper emotional disturbances. This expert testimony was crucial in illustrating the dangerous path Julia had been on, emphasizing the need for a nuanced understanding of the case. The prosecution argued that while Julia's death was accidental, her actions leading up to the incident constituted a pattern of criminal behavior that required legal acknowledgement. They sought to demonstrate that Julia's relentless harassment had created an environment of fear and instability, directly contributing to the tragic outcome. The defense, on the other hand, portrayed Julia as a troubled individual who had lost her way, arguing for leniency in light of her evident psychological struggles. They contended that the legal system should focus on providing support and understanding rather than retribution, given the unique circumstances of the case. After several weeks of intense testimony and legal arguments, the jury was tasked with delivering a verdict. In the end, they found that the charges of harassment and stalking were substantiated, acknowledging the severe impact Julia's actions had on Sarah and Alex's lives. While no one faced criminal penalties for Julia's death, the court's decision underscored the importance of addressing and preventing such destructive behaviors. The trial's conclusion brought a sense of closure for Sarah and Alex, marking the end of a painful chapter in their lives. The legal proceedings highlighted the need for greater awareness and intervention in cases of obsessive and controlling behavior, prompting discussions about mental health and the importance of early support. In the aftermath, Sarah and Alex continued to rebuild their lives, finding solace in the knowledge that justice had been sought and served. The court's verdict served as a reminder of the complexities of human relationships and the profound impact of unchecked desires. The tragedy of Julia Parker became a cautionary tale, one that inspired efforts to better understand and address similar issues in the future, ensuring that such a devastating sequence of events would not be repeated. In summary, the tragic tale of Julia Parker serves as a profound reminder of the destructive power of unchecked emotions and obsessive behavior. What began as a mother's protective instinct spiraled into a dark and consuming infatuation with devastating consequences. The story of Sarah and Alex highlights the fragile balance between love and control, and the importance of recognizing the signs of unhealthy attachments before they escalate. As we reflect on this heartbreaking narrative, it becomes clear that the seeds of disaster were sown long before the final tragic night. Julia's inability to cope with her emotions, her unrelenting need for control, and her deep-seated insecurities created an environment of fear, tension, and ultimately tragedy. Sarah and Alex were caught in a web of manipulation and emotional turmoil, their lives forever altered by the events that unfolded. This tale also underscores the critical need for mental health awareness and early intervention. Julia's behavior was symptomatic of deeper psychological issues that went unaddressed, leading her down a path of obsession and control. Understanding and addressing such issues can prevent similar tragedies, fostering healthier relationships and emotional well-being. As viewers, we are reminded to be vigilant of the signs of emotional distress in ourselves and others. The importance of seeking help, communicating openly, and setting boundaries cannot be overstated. Obsession unchecked can transform love into a weapon and care into a curse. Let the story of Julia Parker be a testament to the consequences of unbridled emotions and a call to nurture our relationships with compassion, respect, and balance. Thank you for watching this true crime documentary. If you found this story insightful, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more compelling content. Remember, the power of unchecked emotions can lead to unforeseen tragedy. Stay informed, stay compassionate, and take care of your mental well-being.